Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to the Battle of the American Civil War with your host, Bang and Dang. Moving on in a year of 1862 with another 4 battles here. I don't even know if we can...
Still in May. So all this shit's happening. The past 4 episodes, it's all been at the exact same time.
all of them. I don't know if we can even call these battles. There haven't even been no battle since... since Fort Jackson and St. Phillips.
All right.
All the rest of it are just little skirmishes, is what we have here, too. 3 of them, at least. And... there's only been 4 that we've done in May so far. Oh, I lied. Because the Siege of Corinth was all through May. Mm-hmm. Got a lot more coming in May, though. 4 of them today. We got the Battle of Princeton Courthouse in West Virginia, Battle of Whitney's Lane in Arkansas, capture Tucson in Arizona, and the Battle of Front Royal in Virginia.
Ooh.
So 2 of those names have Virginia in it, so you can guess who's winning those.
Right.
I'll leave the scraps to the Unions. First up, Battle of Princeton Courthouse, fought May 15th through the 17th, 1862, Mercer County, Virginia, which is now West Virginia, in conjunction with Stonewall Jackson's Shenandoah Valley campaign.
Right.
Early May 1862, Union forces were positioned to invade Virginia at 2 places. Brigadier General Robert H. Milroy of the Union, his column, its axis of march. Brigadier General Robert H. Milroy's column advanced from Cheat Mountain and occupied in succession Camp Allegheny, Monterey, McDowell, and the Shenandoah Mountain.
Look at that shit.
Retreating before the oncoming Federals, Confederate Brigadier General Edward Allegheny Johnson pulled back to Westview, 6 miles west of Staunton.
All right. Well, Union soldiers of Brigadier General Jacob D. Cox's district of Kanawha, they threatened the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad. They were threatening you, Railroad. By mid-May, the Federals, although ousted from Parisburg, held Mercer County, and braced for a lunge at the railroad.
Trying to lunge at it.
Confederate Brigadier General Humphrey Marshall, that sounds like a Confederate name,
Right.
arrived from Abingdon, jeez, oh Pete, from Abingdon, Virginia, with the Army of East Kentucky. And seizing the initiative, Marshall bested Cox's 2 brigades during 3 days of fighting, which was 15th, 16th, and 17th of May. In Mercer County, centering on Princeton Courthouse. They're like, we're going to center on that courthouse. Which one? Princeton. Probably the only courthouse.
Probably the only one, and wherever the hell they are.
129 casualties in total.
Breaking contact with the Confederates on the night of May 17th, Cox withdrew 20 miles away, and Colonel George Crook of the Union commanding Cox's 3rd Brigade marched to and occupied the city of Lewisburg, though, where on May 23rd he defeated Brigadier General Henry Heth's brigade, which I'm sure we'll have coming up here. He withdrew upon learning that Stonewall Jackson's army had routed a Union division at Winchester on May 25th, which we'll get to as well. What the hell is going on May 25th and 23rd? That would be... we'll have Front Royal, if that's one. Yeah, May 23rd, so we'll have that one at the end of this show.
And Winchester
Right after that. So at a battle as well, so...
Hey, so Stonewall Jackson. He don't compete nothing less.
You don't. Well...
It's not an A battle. I won't be there.
Right.
Well, moving on from there... Battle of Whitney's Lane, also known as the Action at Whitney's Lane. It was a small but psychologically important land battle. It was fought on 19th of May, 1862 in north central Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Early 1862, Union Major General Samuel R. Curtis had successfully invaded northwest Arkansas and defeated Confederate forces at the Battle of Pea Ridge.
Which we did.
Soon after, most Confederate forces in Arkansas were withdrawn across the Mississippi, leaving the state almost defenseless. Curtis intended to press his invasion with the hope of reaching the capital city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and knocking the state out of the war.
Like, Arkansas, you're done.
Right.
No need for you no more. Well, the Confederate outlook in the spring of 1862 was grim, as we've been chronicling here. They just recently picked up a couple wins in a row last episode. Most of his armed forces had been withdrawn from Arkansas, and no commander with field experience remained. Wow. General John Selden Roan was put in charge of the remaining Arkansas forces, and then General Curtis began his movement from northwest Arkansas in early April. He moved a 17,000-man army back into Missouri to take advantage of better transportation routes and headed east.
Okay.
He established his base of supply at Rolla, Missouri. Curtis reached West Plains, Missouri on April 29th and turned southwards into Arkansas.
Fantastic.
In addition to his large force, Curtis was assigned an additional 5,000 men under Brigadier General Frederick Steele.
Fantastic. Look at this guy.
So he got 23,000 rolling into the state.
Dang.
22,000, my bad.
During the early parts of May, Curtis and Steele encountered numerous logistical difficulties. Poor weather, difficult terrain, lack of consistent resupply slowed their progress.
Didn't they say they moved from that part of Missouri because it was easier?
Right. But by the 9th of May, Curtis's large but ill-supplied force had emerged from the Ozark foothills onto flat ground at Searcy.
Ooh, business about to pick up now.
Yeah, it was poised to strike deep into central Arkansas and seize Little Rock itself as soon as supplies were gathered. Like, we're going to get Little Rock once we get those supplies.
Gotta gather them first.
Well, while encamped at Searcy, Curtis and overall commander Major General Henry W. Halleck began to correspond about the upcoming federal administration of Little Rock. I'm like, we should probably
Get some correspondence here.
right, talk this through here, what it's going to look like.
Well, in the meantime, Confederate General Roane set to work immediately in cobbling together a defense to meet the approaching Union Army.
Stat.
Roane stopped elements of the 12th Texas Cavalry that were bound for the eastern theaters and ordered troops who had made it as far as Memphis to turn around.
Uh-oh.
Said, I need you here.
Oh, that sucks.
Some attempts at recruiting local volunteers were made, but with little success. Like, hell no, man.
No.
May 10th, Roane sent Texas Cavalry as scouts to determine the federal position. Scouts encountered numerous refugees fleeing the Union Army. Refugees reported that the Union forces numbered about 30 grand, mostly German immigrants.
Oh.
There's a lot of German immigrants in the Union Army, wasn't there?
Well, Roane had approximately 1,200 Texas horsemen to confront this force. He ordered cotton stores near Searcy destroyed. Governor Henry Massey Rector prepared government offices for evacuation. Meanwhile, small advance parties from the Union Army clashed with the Texas Scouts between Searcy and Little Rock, and a few Union casualties resulted.
No Confederates?
Guess not. By the 19th of May, several companies of the Texas Cavalry had reached Searcy Landing and awaited an opportunity to strike the overwhelming opponent. Why would you?
Dude, look at these guys. They're like 1,200 strong, and they're like,
Right.
I don't give a shit. We're taking it to these 30
30 grand? What's that?
Right. Spit on 30 grand.
Right.
Union General Curtis continued to worry about logistical problems as the supply line was unable to provide the necessities for his army. Yeah, you probably shouldn't go on the road with like 23,000 men and not be prepared. But
Right.
he ordered Colonel Peter J. Osterhaus, that's a German, to send a strong foraging party to nearby farms. Hey, just go rob everybody. It consisted of 7 companies of mixed infantry and cavalry from the 17th Missouri and the 17th Missouri Infantry and 4th Missouri Cavalry.
Okay.
The forage party crossed the Little Red River and proceeded to 2 farms along Whitney's Lane.
All right.
Scouting parties reported the movement of these companies to Colonel Emory Rogers, who was the commander of about 150 Texas cavalrymen, plus some local volunteers. What the hell good are they?
Right.
About 300 additional Confederate troops were on the way, but Rogers decided to attack even though he was outnumbered.
Oh.
He divided his forces into 2 groups, one of Texans and one of Arkansans, and ordered a mounted charge down the lane.
Damn right he did. Look at that shit. With initial charge overran Company H of the 17th Missouri, which dissolved under fire and fled toward Company F.
Like, Company F!
Right, which was attempting to set up a defensive position in a tree line. I'm like, hey, man, we're trying to get in this tree line. The combined companies fought bravely for a few minutes as more Confederates came up to press them. The untrained and undisciplined Texans and local volunteers attacked fiercely, and in some cases apparently ignored Union soldiers' attempts to surrender. Like, surrender. Like, nope.
Just murdering them,
Nope,
dude.
not down here, boys.
Nope.
Within a short time, Company F had been routed as well.
Jeez.
Meanwhile, Company G of the 17th and some Union cavalry moved forward and traded volleys with Confederate horsemen.
Wow. Major Eugene Kielmansegge of the 4th Missouri Cavalry of the Unions ordered the rest of the available Union troopers to charge the Confederates. Company C of the 4th Missouri plowed into the attackers and managed to drive them back into the woods between the foraging detail and the rest of the Federal Army.
Right.
Other Federal cavalry continued to arrive at the position. Kielmansegge, having concentrated his forces, set up a defensive position and continued to exchange fire with the rebels as they prepared for another attack.
Oh, look at that. Meanwhile, other companies of the 17th Missouri had heard firing from the base camp across the Little Red River and marched out to relieve the forage party. Confederate Major Rogers ordered his men to retreat to the southwest, and most did, though the Arkansans and some Texans remained on the field and attacked the relief column before withdrawing. Whatever. Jeez. They weren't done fighting, I guess. The 300 expected Confederate reinforcements arrived. 300. What's that going to be? Well, they arrived on the field just after the retreat had been sounded and joined in withdrawal. Like, hey, we're here to fight. Oh, we're leaving? Yeah.
I mean, what's 300 going to do? Ask the Spartans. Mm-hmm. They all get killed. The battle at Whitney's Lane had lasted 1 hour and resulted in 51 Union men killed or wounded and approximately 10 Confederate casualties. Wow. 17th Missouri Infantry lost only 68 men during the entire war. Nearly 1/3 of those were at Whitney's Lane. Wow. Another wow.
Wow.
Battle was little more than a skirmish, but the psychological and strategic effects of the conflict were far more than what was reflected by the number of casualties.
You can.
Right, because now they're like, they think the Confederates are even more crazy. Like, look at these crazy ass 150 men attacking however many 17th Missouri had.
Right.
Jeez. For both Confederate soldiers and civilians in Arkansas, the battle provided a huge psychological lift at a critical time.
Right, as morale boost, baby.
Arkansas newspapers trumpeted the battle and praised its participants.
Damn right they did.
These articles lifted the despair that had gripped the state and provided the Confederates with a new sense of optimism and hope. They said, maybe we ain't done yet, guys.
Every saloon within the area were hopping.
Oh, yeah.
Even though their losses were small compared to the size of their force, the results of the battle proved disheartening for the Union.
I bet it did. How many times can you get your ass whooped when you have a way larger amount of men and just like, oh, okay, that's okay.
Right.
Sad.
Well, Union troops were suffering from lack of supplies. Some soldiers reportedly lost confidence in their officers.
I bet.
Within a few days, Confederate cavalry was harassing the Union supply line from the rear, making Union logistics problems even worse. Confederate Theater Commander Hindman also launched a clever disinformation campaign aimed at convincing the Union forces that new units were pouring into Little Rock from Texas. They're coming in, boys. By the 31st of May, Curtis began to rethink his position in the face of the Confederate activity. On the 2nd of June, Curtis held a council of war, and the Federal commanders agreed to a retreat towards Ozark foothills.
Wow, so it worked, huh?
Wow. By the end of June, Curtis had abandoned his campaign against Little Rock entirely.
Jeez.
And he was like, you know what? I'm going to go to Helena. I know it's Helena in Montana. It might be Helena in Arkansas.
Probably Helena.
Right. Anyway, they were like, we're going here to establish a new supply line on the old Mississippi River. All right.
Okay, good for you. That moves us on to the capture of Tucson. We got some good news for the Union.
So you got a morale boost for the Rebs.
Rebs, two in a row.
Yep.
No.
The other one was like inconclusive or some shit, wasn't it?
The last one, apparently.
Well.
I don't know how, but moving on to capture of Tucson. Just prior to the war in the 1850s, we already know this, city of Tucson and Missoula petitioned the United States government to create a separate territory. The North wanted free states and the Southern wanted slave states, or a slave state. They couldn't decide how to divide it. Southerners wanted an east-west division, whereas North wanted a north-south division.
Right.
After the war began, the Confederacy established the Arizona Territory in February using the east-west boundary. Subsequently, the United States created Arizona Territory in 1863 using the current state boundary.
Of course they did.
Right.
Anglo-Arizonians had hoped the creation of a new territory would strengthen their communications with the East and allow for more military aid. Apaches had been fighting a bloody war in the region, leaving Tucson surrounded by occupied Apache land.
Mm-hmm.
Only Tucson's old Presidio walls protected the population from harm. When the Union troops left Arizona to fight in the south and the Butterfield overland mail stations were abandoned, the residents of the region were left with no military support for protection against the old Apaches. Those savages.
They'll come and get you.
Well,
after the arrival of a Confederate force from Texas in mid-1861, the Confederates established small militia garrisons in Tucson, Missoula, Pinos, Altos, and other towns in Confederate Arizona, obviously. Although these militiamen would fight the Apaches successfully in several different engagements, more military strength was needed to hold on to the territory.
Yep.
Early 1862, just before the first Confederate capture of Albuquerque in the New Mexico Territory, General Henry Hopkins Sibley, heard his name, ordered Captain Sherrod Hunter of Tennessee to proceed to Tucson with a small company of Confederate Arizona Rangers from Dona Ana, which is in New Mexico, and some Texas cavalry as well.
Look at that shit. He's like, we need some
these
good
Arizona
boys.
are... Yeah, these Arizona and Texas guys, they're riding together, aren't they?
Yeah, man, they have to. Well, Jack Swilling was a member of the Tucson reinforcement. He would go on and found the future state capital of Phoenix in the year of 1867. The force consisted of about 75 men. Captain Hunter's orders.
Jeez, don't let that information get out. Who knows that?
Oh, I know.
That's fucking the next thing you know, Arizona will have a new state capital.
Jeez. Captain Hunter's orders were to establish a military alliance with the Pima. And who's the Pima? Ekamil Odamam.
Indian, and probably the leader is Ekamil Odamam.
Right.
Odamam.
And they were to watch for the advance of California volunteers. Mm-hmm. This Union force would begin its march from Fort Yuma, California, and eventually capture Mesilla and Franklin, Texas. Colonel James Riley accompanied Captain Hunter when he left for Tucson. Colonel Riley commanded an escort of 20 men from the Pinos Altos Arizona Guards and another Confederate Arizona militia company. Okay. The Arizona Guards were composed primarily of men who left their homes around Tupac and Shakur. Around Tubac and Tucson following the siege of Tupac in 1861. Did we have the siege of Tupac?
No, because it didn't exist. About 100 Confederates arrived in Tucson February 28, 1862. They joined a small Tucson militia, numbering about 25 men. Yeah, that's pretty small.
I'd say so.
Other than this force of approximately 100 cavalrymen, additional military support from the south never arrived.
Oh.
The formal flag raising occurred on March 1st, after which Colonel Riley and his escort went south to Sonora, Mexico for a mission of diplomacy. Early May, the garrison of Tucson fought 2 battles with the Apache while foraging for supplies in the Dragoon Mountains. We covered that. First engagement was a defeat for the rebels, and the second was a victory. After the skirmish at Stanwick Station, covered that, and the Battle of Pachacho Peak, covered that, and the capture of Union squad in the Pima villages, Colonel James Henry Carleton and his army of over 2,000 Californians occupied abandoned Fort Breckenridge to the northeast of Tucson.
All right. Look at that shit. 14th of May, Californians began their march to Tucson from the fort. That very same day, Sherrod Hunter ordered the evacuation of Tucson. He left 10 of his militia behind under the command of Lieutenant James Henry Tevis. Their orders: observe the Union approach. That's all you got to do, but just observe it.
Yeah.
Well, 20th of May, 1862, Captain Emil Fritz with the Company B, 1st California Cavalry Regiment, entered Tucson, not approaching from the west, as Confederates had expected, but from the north and east via the Canada del Oro, whatever that is. Captain Fritz, with part of his company, entered from the east side of the town, while Lieutenant Juan F. Girardo, with the remainder company, entered from the north. Lieutenant Tevis, who had been watching he was observing, who was observing the western approach, was completely surprised by Lieutenant Guado's sudden appearance from the Canada del Oro, and narrowly avoided capture by Union forces. He was like, "Oh shit,
get out of here!" Lieutenant Tevis beat a hasty retreat to the south and then east along the old overland mail route in the direction of Mesilla. California volunteers secured Tucson without firing a single shot.
Damn.
Returned the Stars and Stripes to the city after a Confederate occupation that had lasted only 80 days.
Oh, wow.
Captain Hunter arrived in Mesilla on May 27th. His company, along with Arizona Rangers and the Arizona Guards, were formed into Lieutenant Colonel Philmon Herbert's battalion of Arizona Cavalry. The Arizonans ceased being militia and officially became Confederate soldiers under General Henry Sibley.
Okay.
No more militia for you, boys.
Right. After the Battle of Glorieta Pass and the retreat of General Sibley's army, the Arizona Cavalry Battalion was ordered to remain behind to hold on to Mesilla and the surrounding valley. Men under Sherrod Hunter fought with New Mexican militia near Mesilla on the 1st of June in 1862. The skirmish ended with no known casualties on either side, and reports indicate a Union victory due to the loss of Confederate horses and equipment at the battle. Dang. The rebels retreated from Mesilla a few days later.
Of course they did. When the Arizona Cavalry withdrew into Texas, they were some of the last Confederate soldiers to leave Confederate Arizona. Though the Confederates, due to a lack of manpower, failed to hold Arizona, the Arizonans themselves achieved their main goal, creation of a territory separate from that of New Mexico.
Hey.
That's all they wanted.
We're not New Mexico anymore, boys.
The United States established Arizona Territory with Tucson as the capital in 1863, using a north-south boundary. Towns of Mesilla, Pinos, Altos, and others were not included in the new Arizona Territory, though. Said they remained part of New Mexico and are now within the present state of New Mexico.
No shit.
And, Mesilla, New Mexico, yeah.
Look at that, buds.
All right.
Wow. Well, the Confederate occupation of Arizona prompted a return of Union forces to the region in order to reassert federal government control. Obviously, right? You got to.
That would be the point of occupying it, wouldn't it?
Just put your flag up and scoot out of town. Thus providing Arizona military support necessary for protection against Apaches.
Mm-hmm.
The California column remained on guard in Arizona until relieved by the regular Army of the United States in the spring of 1866. War's over, boys. Head on out.
Like, finally, it's been over.
Right. Making them the last volunteer forces to be mustered out of federal service in the American Civil War.
Good for them. Good for them.
It's always the ones in the West that learn last.
That moves us to our last battle of the day, I guess. I'm pretty short on this episode. 4 battles. Thought it was going to go longer than this. We'll see. Battle of Front Royal, also known as Guard Hill or Cedarville. Which one is it, guys? Make up your fucking minds. Was fought on May 23rd, 1862 as part of Jackson's Shenandoah Valley campaign. Confederate forces commanded by, obviously, Stonewall Jackson were trying to keep Union forces engaged in the Shenandoah Valley to prevent them from joining the Peninsula Campaign. They said, you ain't going with McClellan. Nope.
Not today, Charlie.
Stay away from Richmond. March of 1862, Union forces led by George B. McClellan began the Peninsula Campaign on the Virginia Peninsula.
Uh-oh.
To the west in the Shenandoah Valley, Union Major General Nathaniel Banks pushed the Confederate troops of Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson to the south.
Oh, pushing them, huh? Well, look at Jackson getting pushed around.
Oh, for now.
Right. Well, Jackson had orders to try to distract Union troops in the valley so that they would not be available for McClellan. By 21st of March, Union High Command decided that much of Banks' force was not necessary for the security of the Shenandoah Valley.
Oh, you guys are idiots.
Right, and much of it was sent to Washington. They're like, you guys come back to old D.C., boys. Leave about 9,000 people of the 35 that you have. Leave them there in the valley, which they did. March 23rd, Jackson attacked the Union forces in the valley in the First Battle of Kernstown.
Covered that.
The Confederate attack was repulsed.
Yep.
But it was still considered concerning enough to return the rest of Banks' command to the valley and hold another corps at Manassas, depriving McClellan's campaign of about 60,000 men.
Yeah, wasn't that the one where Lincoln was so nervous because of the aggressiveness of Stonewall?
Right.
He's like, yeah, you got to get those troops back in there.
Gotta go, bud.
After Kernstown, Jackson withdrew south in the valley, where he joined forces with Major General Richard Ewell, leaving Ewell and his men to face Banks. Leaving Ewell and his men to face Banks, Jackson took his troops southwest towards McDowell, Virginia, early May to confront a Union force commanded by Major General John C. Fremont. Part of Fremont's command, led by Brigadier General Robert H. Milroy, attacked Jackson's men on May 8th in the Battle of McDowell. We just did that one last week. Confederates were victorious, and Fremont withdrew his force. Jackson then moved his men back north to face Banks. He said, all right, Fremont was a little bitch. What do you got, Banks? By then, part of Banks' force had already been transferred out of the valley, and on May 12th, the division of Brigadier General James Shields was ordered east. Oh. Banks then withdrew his remaining force to Strasburg.
Yep, gotta go to Strasburg, boys. Mm-hmm. That was a stupid decision by that damn guy in D.C.
Right.
Meanwhile, Ewell had received an order on the 17th of May, dated from 13th of May, from General Joseph E. Johnston.
The big guy.
To take his force from the valley to support Johnston's army against McClellan. Mm-hmm. Jackson sent a message to Johnston that same day requesting that Ewell be allowed to remain with his command so that a blow could be struck against Banks. Well, he knows he at least got 4 days.
Right.
It took how long? Yeah, 4 days for that note to get to him, which is ridiculous.
Crazy, right?
Right. And on May 18th, Jackson and Ewell decided that Ewell should remain under Jackson's authority until the reply from Johnston was received.
Right.
Makes sense. Right. As it took several days for communications to travel between Jackson and Johnston, Jackson did not receive a reply until the 20th of May, when another set of orders for Ewell to move east were received.
Well, Jackson still didn't have a reply. And that's when he got another set of orders from Johnson saying, hey, dude, we need Ewell to get out here.
All right, what the hell, man?
What are you doing? Well, Jackson then contacted General Robert E. Lee, who was an advisor to Confederate President Jefferson Davis, requesting the continued use of Ewell's men. But another message from Johnson arrived later that day, giving Jackson discretionary use of Ewell's command. So he got what he wanted. Between Jackson and Ewell's force, the Confederates nominally had 17,000 men, although historian Gary Esselbarger estimates that due to desertion and straggling, the true number is closer to 12 or 14.
Either way.
Confederates resumed moving north to strike Banks. Union forces at Strasburg had built fortifications facing south, but Jackson decided to move to the east and destroy the Union outpost at Front Royal.
Okay.
Look at him.
By taking Front Royal, Jackson could sever Banks's communications to the east and then get into the rear of the Strasburg position, either capturing it or forcing its abandonment. The Confederates began their march on the 21st of May, crossing Massanutten Mountain and entering the Page Valley to approach Front Royal. At the time of the Confederate approach, Banks had about 6,500 men in Strasburg, about 1,000 in Front Royal and 1,000 in Winchester. Jackson did not know the exact Union strengths, but was aware that the force at Front Royal was weaker than at Strasburg. Front Royal and Strasburg were separated by about 12 miles.
Ooh, that's a long line.
On the more direct railroad route, although longer paths existed on roads.
Sure they did.
Right.
Jackson prepared his attack on the morning of May 23rd. Colonel Turner Ashby's cavalry was sent between Front Royal and Strasburg to cut telegraph lines and the railroad to prevent Union forces from moving between the two towns. Unaware that he greatly outnumbered the Union force in Front Royal, Jackson decided against attacking from the direct route, which was the Luray Road. Instead, Ewell's men were to take the Goonie Manor Road in a flanking attack. Stonewall Brigade and some artillery were to remain at Asbury's Chapel, which is 4.5 miles from Front Royal. Any Union forces withdrawn from Front Royal would have to cross both the South Fork and the North Fork of the Shenandoah River.
Eckelbarger suggests that decision to concentrate on a single road would also prevent Union escapees from Front Royal from providing Banks with an accurate estimate of the size of Jackson's command. Could happen. Yeah. The Confederates learned from the captured pickets that Union force in Royal was the 1st Maryland Infantry Regiment.
Look how quickly these fucking guys that were captured just told everything.
What's over there? 1st Maryland.
You guys want like a cup of soup or something? Sure.
Well, why not? So Jackson ordered the Confederates 1st Maryland Infantry Regiment to the front of the Confederate column.
Look at that.
He's like,
they got a 1st Maryland Infantry Regiment. Oh, hey, 1st Maryland Infantry Regiment of the Confederates. Why don't you get up front?
They're like, you show them who's real Maryland.
Right.
The Confederate Maryland Regiment had recently had an incident with mutiny. But Colonel Bradley T. Johnson...
A lot of Johnsons and Johnstons in the Confederates.
He made a patriotic speech that energized the unit. At about 2 p.m., the Confederate attack began. With the Marylanders in front and Major Robidoux Wheat's notoriously unruly battalion of Louisiana Tigers behind, with the rest of the Brigadier General Richard Taylor's Louisiana Brigade in revoice.
The Louisiana Tigers,
reserve. Right.
Better not let people get a hold of that. We'll have no more LSU Tigers.
No.
Jeez. The Maryland Regiment and Wheat's men totaled about 450 men. That's it. Wow. Bell Boyd rode from the town to give Jackson information about the Union force, although historian James I. Robertson Jr. notes that Boyd's significance at Front Royal has been greatly exaggerated. Historian Peter Cozzens states that Boyd, quote-unquote, told him little or nothing about the Yankee force that he did not already know. Union troops were caught by surprise, unaware that the Confederates had infantry in the area.
Oh, jeez.
Wow! Banks had not stationed any cavalry at Front Royal, and the lack of cavalry in the morning prevented Union forces from learning of the Confederate advance earlier.
Oh, my goodness. How do you not have cavalry at all anywhere? I don't care where you're at.
Stupid.
Jeez. The Confederate attack quickly drove the Union forces from Front Royal and their camp, and the Union commander, Colonel John Reese Keenly, withdrew what remained of his force onto Richardson's Hill, a height between Front Royal and the South Fork, and deployed 2 10-pound Parrott rifles. Okay. Some of Kenley's men were captured within the town, and the Union supply train was captured as well.
That's not good.
Not much organized resistance was met within the town. One Confederate soldier referred to the town stage of battle as more like a police riot than a fight between soldiers. Well, whatever. In front of a new Union position. Damn, they had police riots back then.
Apparently.
Jeez. In front of a new Union position was an open meadow, which would have to be crossed to frontally attack Kenley's position.
That's smart. Right.
Kenley had about 700 infantrymen remaining in the line at this point. The 2 Parrott guns were fired effectively on the Confederates. Those Parrott guns.
Okay, well, with the 2 Union cannon battering his lines, Jackson had his chief of artillery, Colonel Stapleton Crutchfield, hell of a name, bring up the artillery to counter the Union fire, but the first battery that reported was armed only with guns of too short of range to reach a Union position.
Right.
Crutchfield was eventually able to locate 3 cannons with long enough ranges, and a 15-minute artillery duel followed along. Kenly tried to make his line seem stronger than it was. A small detachment of the 29th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment guarded the area between the two forks of the river, and 100 men from 2 companies of the 5th New York Cavalry Regiment, which Banks had set from Strasburg that morning despite being unaware of the battle, arrived and sortied against the skirmishers of the Confederate 1st Maryland. 100, though, I mean, come on, jeez.
Right. Meanwhile, Johnson's Marylanders attacked from the center. The 6th Louisiana Infantry attacked from the Union left. Attacked the Union left. And more of Taylor's men fought with the Union right. Some of the Confederate cavalry to the west, the 2nd Virginia Cavalry Regiment and the 6th Virginia Cavalry, under Colonel Thomas Flournoy, also raced for the bridge over the North Fork, as Confederate control of that bridge would cut off the last Union line of retreat. Damn right it would. These cavalrymen had cut railroad and telegraph lines earlier in the day before heading for the fighting at Front Royale. No telegraph.
No nothing.
Nice.
Dude. The arrival of Flournoy's cavalry convinced Kenly to withdraw at about 4:30 p.m. Union troops withdrew across the bridges over the South Fork and the North Fork and lit the bridges on fire. They burned some of their supplies to prevent them from falling into Confederate hands. Confederates were able to put out the fires on the South Fork Bridge, and Jackson sent aides to bring up the artillery, and Stonewall Brigade left at Asbury's Chapel. While the commander of Stonewall Brigade, Brigadier General Charles Sidney Winder, had put his men and the artillery in a march behind the rest of the Confederates, they were still too far to the rear to be available for fighting.
Oh, still too far to be available for fighting. So what's the freaking point? Jeez, oh, Pete.
Yeah, why not?
Kenly reformed his command on Guard Hill across the North Fork, while many of the Confederates became disorganized and plundered the abandoned Union camp. He was like, okay, they're over there acting like idiots,
Right.
eating our half-eaten bowls of soup.
Damn them.
With the addition of about 100 men from the detachment of 29th Pennsylvania, Kenly defended Guard Hill with about 800 men. News did not reach Banks of the fighting at Front Royal until about 5:45 p.m.
Jeez.
when a single messenger reached his headquarters.
Around 6 p.m., a few of Flournoy's men were able to cross at a ford, and part of the 8th Louisiana Infantry Regiment was able to swim across.
Swim.
They were able to douse the fire on the North Fork Bridge, and while a portion of the bridge collapsed, enough of the span remained that men could cross single file.
Hey.
With the Guard Hill position untenable with Confederates across the river, Kenly withdrew his men to the hamlet of Cedarville, Virginia. Jackson ordered Flournoy to push 250 cavalrymen across the charred bridge and pursue the Union troops, and Jackson himself followed behind his men. He said, all right, I'll follow behind you.
Right.
I'm supposed to lead, but I'll follow.
Hey, what are you going to do, right? Making a stand about 1.5 miles north of Cedarville, Kenly deployed his artillery, ordered the New York cavalrymen to charge. Instead, the cavalry's commander lost his nerve and ordered his men to flee to the field. He's like, no, we're fleeing to the field, damn it.
No, sorry, we would not be charging anybody.
Well, they are from New York.
Right.
The remaining Union troops formed a line at Fairview, the house of local man Thomas McKay. Flournoy's men charged the position twice, undeterred by a volley from the Union troops that cut apart Company B of the 6th Virginia. The Union line broke into confusion in the melee. Kenly suffered multiple wounds during the melee and was captured. Dang. As were most of the Union troops.
Yeah.
While Jackson had fought at Front Royale, Ashby had encountered Union troops during his mission. Okay.
At about 2 p.m., his men attacked Buckton Station on the Manassas Gap Railroad. Position was
Manassas Gap.
The Manassas Gap. Position was defended by elements of the 3rd Wisconsin Infantry and the 27th Indiana Infantry, a force of about 150 men. An attack made by 300 Confederates was repulsed, with the loss of 2 promising officers, and a second charge fared little better. Withdrawing down the railroad, Ashby had the railroad line cut and the telegraph wires cut as well. And the railroad line and the telegraph wires cut, accomplishing his purpose of isolating Front Royal from Banks.
Right.
Cozzens described the needless fighting at Buckton Station as a waste of lives. Yeah, what are you going to do, man? You're in the throes of war.
All right. Cozzens places Jackson's losses, excluding Ashby's action, at about 36 men killed and wounded, while stating that Kenly's forces suffered 773 casualties, of which 691 were as prisoners. Robertson estimated Union prisoners at about 700 and places Jackson's losses at less than 100. Well, whatever. The National Park Services gives Union losses as 904, Confederate losses as 56. Historian Robert G. Tanner says the Union lost about 900, and the Confederates lost over 100.
All right, what do we got? A pissing battle between these historians?
Well, the Echo Barker
Jeez.
estimates Union losses at about 900. Confederates also captured both Parrott rifles and number of wagons, and about $300,000 worth of supplies.
Wow.
Ashby's expedition netted the capture of 2 locomotives.
Jeez.
Dang, that was a
Hell of a
right,
score.
right.
A Union soldier, William Taylor, was awarded the Medal of Honor in 1897 for his actions in the bridge burning at Front Royal and in the later Battle of Weldon Railroad. To prevent being cut off from Winchester, Banks responded to the fall of Front Royal by rapidly withdrawing from Strasburg. Jackson attacked part of the withdrawn force at Middletown the next day, then defeated Banks in the First Battle of Winchester on May 25th. After defeating Banks at Winchester, Jackson advanced his force towards Harper's Ferry. Meanwhile, Fremont and Shields moved their forces towards Strasburg to concentrate against Jackson. They said, we're taking this fucker down.
Well, you're not. Don't worry, you won't take Jackson down. Ewell was tasked with fighting Fremont and defeated his force at the Battle of Cross Keys on the 8th of June. While leaving the field at Cross Keys to rejoin Jackson, Ewell's men burned a bridge to prevent Fremont from joining forces with Shields. 9th of June, Jackson defeated Shields in the Battle of Port Republic. With Shields and Fremont withdrawing, Jackson was able to take his force from Shenandoah Valley and join General Lee's army for the 7 days battles. He's like, I got to be there for that. I already bought my dress. Jackson's Valley campaign has successfully prevented Union forces from joining McClellan.
He did what he set out to do, huh? I did what I set out to do. Without a doubt, undoubtedly. And all this looking down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. Right?
Whatever.
He made up that verse. That's where Eminem stole it from.
Yep.
It's in his journals.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yes, sir. After all year of 1862, the Union just throttling on the Rebs, old Stonewall comes in and says, I'm your Huckleberry. The Union whipping ass all year, and then these last few battles, Confederates are just... Jackson says, I'll take you guys down. Don't worry about it, buddies. But that don't last, because...
Nope.
Looking down the old year, I mean, we got a few Reds down the line, but
It evens out after a while.
nothing too significant there. That was Princeton Courthouse, Whitney's Lane captured Tucson in the Battle of Front Royal. Coming up next week, we got the First Battle of Winchester, and at least the Battle of Hanover Courthouse, maybe even the the First Battle of Pocotaligo in South Carolina. Okay, and maybe even the Battle of Seven Pines.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that'll do it for us.
Yep.
And the battles of Princeton Courthouse, Whitney's Lane, captured Tucson, Front Royal as well. We'll be back next week. But in the meantime, go check out our other show we do called Outlaws and Gunslingers, where this week's episode's all about the infamous and famous. Infamous and famous. What's the difference between those two words? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But they're both mean something different. The Columbine school shooting.
Yep.
Lots of messed up stuff going on there. And of course, cops didn't do their job the way they should have.
Nope.
And draw criticism there.
Yep.
Was it because of Marilyn Manson? Was it because of the Doom video game?
Could have been.
Or was it because of bullying? Why did it happen? We don't know. Maybe we can figure it out if you guys listen to the show.
Oh.
But, yeah. That is Columbine over there on the Outlaws and Gunslingers, plus 70 plus other episodes that you guys can go and listen to into the archives. Plus, This Week in Sports History. Baseball heavy still. Don't worry, we're getting there. Baseball's almost over for the year, and we'll have a lot more football, baseball, basketball. No, not baseball. Basketball and probably not even hockey, but
hockey.
At least the other two. But Battles of the American Civil War and This Week in Sports History on the same network. That is the Bang Dang Network, so just search that, and you'll find these two shows, plus a couple others that we do, and we'll be back next week for 4, maybe even 5 more battles. And we are the Mother Michiganders.